Wembley Stadium shook with sound. 72,000 voices surged like a tidal wave, echoing off steel girders in the humid summer night. Flashbulbs burst like firecrackers. Giant screens flickered with Freddie Mercury's every move, every flick of his wrist, every shimmy of his hips, every flash of white teeth in that devil-may-care grin. All we hear is, "Radio, G.A.J." Freddie had the crowd in the palm of his hand, commanding the stage like a man born in its fire. He wore white trousers with red racing stripes and a sleeveless tank that clung to his body, shimmering with sweat. The microphone stand, half its length broken off just the way he liked it, danced in his grip as he twirled it like a weapon. Radio goo-goo. The audience clapped in rhythm, their hands pounding like thunder. Boom, clap, and then blackness. Total, utter blackness. It happened in a blink. One moment. A supernova color, lasers slicing through smoke, the earth vibrating with music. The next, silence. No warning. No flicker. Just gone. The giant screens froze. The amps died. The lights, stage, stadium, auxiliary, all cut at once. Even the emergency lights stuttered and failed. All that remained was a collective gasp of 72,000 people plunging into the void. For one long second, the silence was thick enough to choke on. Then came the wave. Murmurs turned to panic. The crowd stirred restlessly, like an unsettled sea. Some shouted. Others cursed. Thousands of voices collided in confusion. Is this part of the show? No way, man. Something's wrong. Did Transformer blow? Where's Freddie? Some laughed nervously. Others raised lighters and phones. Pinpricks of orange and blue scattered like stars in the ink. But Freddie Mercury didn't move. He stood frozen at the edge of the stage, just beyond the last dying pulse of light. His face, seconds ago glowing with charisma, was now a silhouette, sharp cheekbones and wild hair outlined by nothing but the faintest glimmer of crowd-lit flame. The band members stumbled in the dark behind him, their instruments lifeless in their hands. Roger Taylor tapped his snare. No Mike picked it up. Brian may look to the wings, but the crew was scrambling, yelling into dead radios. Freddie closed his eyes. He took a slow breath. He felt the darkness pressing in from all sides, not just physical but emotional, a cold, creeping shadow of expectation. A voice in the front row shouted, "Freddie, say something." He didn't. Not yet. Instead, he reached out his hand, gently, almost reverently, as though testing the night. And then he clapped, just once, loud, sharp, a single sound that sliced through the chaos like a lightning bolt. Then again, and again, 3 claps, in rhythm. Clap, clap, clap. Silence followed. The crowd hesitated. Then someone, somewhere, answered. Clap, clap, clap. Another section joined in. Then another. Row by row, block by block. The clapping spread like a heartbeat reawakening the lifeless stadium. Freddie stepped forward into the darkness. No spotlight guided him. No cue from the sound booth. Just instinct. He raised both arms, framing the night with outstretched palms. And then, AYOH. He shouted it raw. No microphone, just lungs and soul. The sound carried, impossibly, into the abyss. Silence. Then, AYOH. Tens of thousands answered. A grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. He did it again. AYO. The crowd echoed louder. This time with conviction. It wasn't perfect. The timing was messy. The key was off. But it was alive. Freddie began walking the front of the stage, barefoot on cold wood, hands conducting invisible waves of human sound. The security team stood frozen at the edges, unsure whether to call for evacuation or let it play out. In the production tent, a technician whispered, "We just lost both generators. Main power's fried. We have nothing." Freddie didn't know. Or if he did, he didn't care. To him, the stage was still his. Light or no light. The band watched in the shadows, stunned. Never, in all their years of touring, had something like this happened. And never had Freddie seemed so still, so grounded. He turned to the audience again. Somebody to Louvre. The first 3 words hung in the darkness like threads of gold. The crowd picked up the melody, hesitant at first, then strong. Freddie nodded, eyes gleaming now. He dropped to one knee, fists clenched against his chest. Each morning I get up, I die a little. A sea of phones now lit the front rows. Faces glowing, tears streaming down cheeks as the sound grew. People who hadn't sung in years, people who'd never carried a tune, all singing now in unison. No lights, no instruments, no amplification. Just him, just them, together. Freddie rose slowly and looked out over the ocean of flickering lights. A single voice rang out from the back of the stadium, hoarse but loud. "You don't need the lights, Freddie." The crowd erupted. A wave of applause, a roar of emotion. Freddie lifted his hand again, paused, let the silence return, and then, softly, he whispered into the dark, "Darling, the lights never made the magic." If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. Freddie Mercury had never heard a stadium this quiet, not in all the years of touring, not in Tokyo, not in Munich, not even in the dead hours of soundcheck. Silence in a stadium this size was unnatural, a beast holding its breath. He stood still, chest rising and falling, as the fading echoes of their improvised "Somebody to Love" drifted off into the night. For a heartbeat, he could feel everything. The sticky air on his skin, the creak of the stage beneath his feet, the crackling nerves in his chest. Behind him, Brian May approached cautiously, his guitar hanging uselessly around his neck. "Freddie," he whispered, barely audible in the dark, "we've lost everything. Backup power, mains, soundboard. It's all dead." Freddie turned slowly. "How long?" "They don't know. Could be 5 minutes. Could be he didn't finish." Freddie's jaw clenched. He exhaled slowly, nodding. "All right," he said. "Tell him to stay ready." Brian hesitated. Are we really doing this?" No lights, no mics, no nothing. Freddie didn't answer. Instead, he looked out across the sea of faces, barely visible but undeniably present. 72,000 people, waiting. He stepped back into the darkness and stared into the void where the stage lights should have been. And somewhere deep inside, he felt that old fear begin to stir. Long before the spotlight, before the stadiums, before Queen, there had been a tiny stage in a forgotten bar in Kensington. Just a cheap mic, a flickering neon sign, and 5 drunk patrons. He'd sung Bohemian Rhapsody to an audience more interested in their drinks than his dreams. And then the night he'd lost his voice, food poisoned before a college gig, his throat raw, barely able to croak. The heckling had been brutal. You're nothing without the voice. You hide behind the lights and makeup. Fraud. He hadn't forgotten those nights. He carried them like old photographs folded into the wallet of his soul. The world loved Freddie Mercury, the legend, the god, the peacock with crown, but they didn't know the man who once cried in the back alley behind a bar, wondering if he would ever matter. He had learned to matter. He learned how to light a room on fire with a single look, how to hold 50,000 souls in suspense with a flick of his wrist. He learned to build a persona so electric, so undeniable, that no one could ever doubt him again. But tonight, the lights were gone. The sound was gone. The costume meant nothing in the dark. Was he still Freddie Mercury without it? He felt the question burn behind his ribs like a match ready to go out. A woman in the front row caught his eye, her face lit only by the screen of her phone. She looked up at him, tears on her cheeks. She mouthed something. "Don't stop." Just 2 words. He blinked. Something shifted. He turned away from the edge of that dangerous self-doubt and walked back toward center stage. "I've never felt so naked in my life," he said softly, to no one in particular. "And I used to sing in tights." Somewhere in the crowd, someone laughed. Others joined. The laughter rippled outward, like sunlight through clouds. He smiled. "Shall we find out," he said, raising his voice, "what music sounds like without all the tricks?" A murmur of approval moved through the masses. And then, without warning, he sat down, right there on the stage, cross-legged like a child, silhouetted against 1,000 phone lights. No ego, no theatrics, just Freddie. Let me tell you something, he said, voice carrying through the open air with surprising strength. The first time I ever sang for someone, I was 15. A boy I fancied at school. He played piano. I made up some lyrics and sang along. I thought it would make him fall in love with me. He chuckled. It didn't. Laughter again. Warmer now. But I fell in love. With this. He gestured around. With music. With moments like this. Not the glamour. Not the fame. The connection. The crowd was hushed. Leaning in. I've sung in palaces and pubs. I've worn capes and crown jewels. And I've sung into broken microphones that smell like beer. But I'll tell you the truth, he paused. I've never felt more real than I do right now. Someone in the stands yelled, "We love you, Freddie." He smiled, eyes wet. Then let me give you something real. And then he began to hum. No lyrics, just melody. A lullaby he remembered from his childhood in Zanzibar. Sung by his mother in the sweltering nights when the power would cut out and all they had were their voices. The sound was soft, fragile, but it wrapped around the stadium like a blanket. The crowd quiet again, this time not in confusion but reverence. He added gentle lyrics, improvising on the spot. The stars went out, but you stayed bright. The music left, but not the night. It was barely audible, but people listened harder. In that moment, he wasn't a rock star. He was a storyteller. He was a friend in the dark. Brian may stood just behind him, watching in awe. He whispered to Roger Taylor, "He's doing it." With nothing. Roger whispered back, "No, with everything." Freddie turned his head slightly, just enough to catch them in the corner of his eye. "Guitar," he said softly. "No amp, just strings." Brian looked confused. "You won't hear it." "I will," Freddie said. "They'll feel it." Brian stepped forward and knelt beside Freddie. He strummed, unplugged, the soft, naked tone of his guitar barely whispering into the silence. Freddie began to sing again, quiet, gentle, intimate. You don't need fire when the heart is warm. You don't need thunder to weather a storm. Somewhere in the stands, a child joined in, then another voice, then a dozen. Freddie looked out and saw people crying, not because the music was loud, not because the lights dazzled them, but because in a moment of silence and darkness, they were all seen, all heard, and that was the magic. Freddie's voice lingered in the air like incense, soft, fragrant with vulnerability, and impossibly sacred. A hush had fallen over the crowd, the kind that didn't beg for volume but for presence. No drums, no lights, no walls of sound. Just a human voice, shared like fire across a village that had, for one miraculous moment, remembered how to listen. He was still sitting on the edge of the stage, legs dangling over the side like a schoolboy in trouble. But his posture was relaxed now, fluid. He leaned forward slightly, gazing into the crowd not as a performer towering over fans, but as a friend holding court in the world's largest living room. A low hum began to rise again. It was nothing structured, just a wave of people echoing the melody he'd started. 1,000 keys, 1,000 voices. Imperfect, out of tune but alive. Freddie tilted his head and smiled. Then he opened his mouth and did what only Freddie Mercury could do. AYOH. No microphone, just lungs and soul, thrown out like a net over the void. The crowd answered back, louder than they had the first time. AYOH. He stood slowly, lit only by the collective constellation of phones and lighters now glittering across the entire stadium like the Milky Way. AYOHU. AYOHU, came the reply, thundering through the dark. The call and response grew louder, deeper. He played with pitch, with rhythm, with tempo, laughing mid-shout as the crowd tried to match his absurd high notes, and groaned in good-natured failure when they fell short. It was tribal, wholly absurd, and beautiful all at once. Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon watched from behind, completely mesmerized. "This man," Roger whispered, shaking his head. "He doesn't need an amp. He doesn't even need a song." "He is the amplifier," Brian replied, "of joy, of pain, of whatever this is. From the wings, a panicked tech whispered, "Power might take another 40 minutes. We're trying to reroute, but—" "Let him go," the stage manager said. "He's already saving the night." Back out on stage, Freddie was now pacing again, not with swagger, but with a kind of sacred intensity. He stopped near the center and pointed at a section of the stands. "You lot, Section C, you're my sopranos now. Give me a H-E-Y. H-E-Y, they screamed back. "Beautiful," he cried. "Section F, baritones. Give me a H-O. Ho!" The sound was chaotic, raw, disorganized, but somehow, right, a rhythm took shape. Freddie clapped. The crowd clapped. He jumped, they jumped. He ran to the far end of the stage, crouched, whispered something, then exploded into a chant. Light it up, light it up, light it up. And without needing an explanation, thousands raised their phones higher, their flames brighter. The crowd became a literal wave of light, like the aurora borealis had descended into Wembley. Near the front, a small commotion broke out. A young boy, no more than 10, was crying, but not out of fear. His mother was kneeling beside him, pointing to the stage and signing frantically. Freddie caught the movement from a corner of his eye. He stopped everything, walked to the edge, knelt, and signed, haltingly and perfectly, "You are loved." The boy's eyes went wide. He gasped and signed something back. The mother wept openly. Freddie turned back to the crowd. "That young man," he said, his voice cracked with emotion, "he can't hear your music, but he can feel it. Every stomp, every clap, every heartbeat." He slapped his chest twice. Boom, 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 boom. The crowd answered. "Tonight, we're not here to watch a concert," he said. "We're here to build one." And then, slowly, almost reverently, he began to sing again. But this time, he didn't pick a Queen anthem. He picked something old, something that predated amps, guitars, and synthesizers. "Amazing Grace." A simple gospel hymn. His voice wavered on the first line. It wasn't perfect, no effects, no reverb, but it was pure. Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. One voice, then 10, then thousands. The crowd, now wholly invested in the moment, sang with him, not to him, with him, some out of tune, some sobbing, some laughing through tears. 72,000 strangers, no longer strangers, just people in the dark, singing like their lives depended on it. Somewhere in the middle rows, a woman clutched her husband's arm and whispered, This is better than the show." Near the top rafters, a man called his mother and held up the phone in silence. A security guard who'd worked 100 concerts stood motionless, whispering to no one in particular, "I'll never see anything like this again." The last note of Amazing Grace hovered like smoke over the crowd. No one moved. No one spoke. And then from the back of the stadium, a man yelled, "That's the real Freddie Mercury." The dam broke. Cheers exploded like fireworks. Freddie stood with his arms wide, drinking it in, not the adoration, but the connection, not the applause, but the shared breath of tens of thousands who, for a few timeless minutes, had created something with him. A show without speakers, a concert without lights, a masterpiece without instruments. He didn't need to shout the obvious. They already knew. The silence had become the stage. And Freddie Mercury had turned it into magic. It started as a flicker. Just one, a dim spark in the rafters above stage left, like a candle struggling against the wind. No one noticed at first. Too transfixed by the sound of 72,000 voices whispering the final note of Amazing Grace into the night sky. Then came a low mechanical hum, like a giant beast waking from slumber. A pulse rippled to the stage floor. The lighting rigs groaned, adjusting. One of the backlights glowed amber, faint and ghostly, spilling across Freddie's boots. The crowd collectively exhaled, a mixture of relief and regret, because as the lights began returning one by one, slowly warming to life, something else began fading. The rawness, the stillness, the intimacy, the spell of the dark was breaking. And yet, as the first real stage light found Freddie's face again, He didn't step into it. He backed away. In the wings, the production crew was scrambling. Cameras rebooted. Instruments powered on. Monitors lit up like a space station. The sound tech gave a thumbs up to Brian May. Systems coming back. Give us 60 seconds. The drummer spun his sticks. The bassist flexed his fingers. The crew was ready for the show to resume. But Freddie wasn't moving. Not yet. He looked out at the crowd, bathed now in dull golden light, their faces visible once more. But something had shifted. Now that the darkness was gone, so too was the shared vulnerability. People were looking around again, talking, filming, checking the time. He could feel them slipping away. Brian approached him from behind, voice gentle. "We've got power. Want to kick off with Don't Stop Me Now?" Freddie didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the sea of people, as if watching a miracle dissolve. "Freddie?" Brian asked again. Freddie finally turned. No, his voice was soft. "Not yet." He walked back to center stage, ignoring the growing hum of electronics around him. "I want to tell you a story," he said, microphone still dead. No one could hear him, until a tech pushed the channel live again, and his voice boomed across the stadium mid-sentence. "Because if I don't, this all becomes just another concert." The audience stilled. Freddie exhaled. His voice echoed, now stronger. There was a time, not that long ago, when I used to hate silence. He let that hang there for a moment. I was afraid of it. Silence meant no applause, no laughter, no music, no proof that I mattered. People were listening again. I filled it with noise, with shows, with glitter and eyeliner and pyrotechnics. Don't get me wrong, I love the noise. I love the show. But tonight, he looked around, eyes wet, voice cracking slightly. "Tonight, you showed me that silence isn't empty. It's full of you, your breath, your voices, your hearts." Murmurs of emotion rippled through the crowd. He smiled that crooked, self-deprecating smile and added, "Also, it turns out you lot are bloody loud even without microphones." Laughter burst like confetti. The tension broke, and something more grounded replaced it. Then he did something no one expected. He walked over to Brian, leaned in, and whispered. Brian blinked. "You're serious?" Freddie nodded. And with that, Brian slung his guitar back on and began to play the opening chords to "We Are the Champions," but quietly. No explosion of lights. No roar of sound. Just a clean, acoustic tone of 6 strings through slowly warming amps. The audience gasped, because Freddie wasn't singing. He was listening to them. They took the cue. Tens of thousands of voices, ragged but beautiful, filled the stadium with the lyrics. "I've paid my dues time after time." Freddie walked the stage, hands to his heart, lips barely moving, eyes filled with glassy emotion. A few times he joined in, but mostly he let them have it, but committed no crime. In every section, people were crying. Security guards, teenagers, grandparents, roadies in the wings, crew on scaffolding. There wasn't a single dry eye in the first 10 rows. As the chorus hit, the power reached full capacity. The lights came on completely now, dazzling brilliant, flashing reds and whites and golds. The full rig kicked in. Smoke machines hissed. Spotlights flew across the crowd. The stadium was back to full performance mode. But even then, the moment held. Freddie lifted the mic to his lips just in time for the final line. No time for losers, 'cause we are the champions of the world. He belted it, full volume, and the stadium erupted. Fireworks shot into the sky. Confetti cannons burst. The video walls flared back to life with slow-motion footage of the audience singing in the dark. Someone had kept the backup feed running. And at center stage, standing in the blinding light, glitter falling around him like golden snow, stood Freddie Mercury, tears on his cheeks, hand on his heart. He let the crowd cheer, let them scream, then leaned into the mic one last time, his voice soft, intimate, cutting through the madness like a needle through velvet. "Don't ever forget what we did without the lights." The stadium was glowing, not just from the lights, which were now blazing with full intensity, bathing every inch of Wembley in golden beams and electric color. But from something else, from within, every person, from the highest nosebleed seat to the front barricade, wore the same expression, disbelief mixed with reverence. Some clutched their chests. Some held hands with strangers. Others just stood frozen, as if terrified to move and break the spell. The power was back. The show had resumed. But something was different now. The spectacle didn't matter as much. The fireworks, the lasers, the bombastic thunder of the amps. It all now served one purpose: to amplify the connection that had been born in the dark. Backstage, technicians and managers were buzzing, but quieter than usual. Even the crew knew they'd witnessed something that would be spoken about for decades. One of the lighting directors, a grizzled road veteran who'd seen 100 tours and had long since grown numb to concert magic, stood near the scaffolding, arms crossed, his voice thick with awe. "I've never," he whispered, "I've just never seen anyone do that. Not like that." The stage manager beside him nodded slowly. He didn't just hold the show together. He turned silence into music. Back on stage, Freddie Mercury took a bow, but not the usual grand, theatrical bow he was famous for. No dramatic sweep of his arms, no cape, no crown. Just a slow bend at the waist. Honest, quiet, thankful. He straightened and held his hand out to Brian, Roger, and John. They joined him at center stage, the four of them shoulder to shoulder, not as performers basking in glory, but as witnesses to a shared miracle. The crowd began to chant, not "We Will Rock You," not "Encore," not "Queen." They chanted one word: Freddie, Freddie, Freddie. He closed his eyes, swallowed hard, and shook his head gently. Then he raised a mic and said, simply, "Tonight you were the band." They played one final song. "These are the days of our lives." No pyrotechnics, no light show, just a melody, stripped bare, and the hush of an audience that felt every word. It was an unusual choice to close a stadium show, tender, nostalgic, even mournful. But it was perfect, because it wasn't about performance anymore. It was about remembrance. And when the last chord faded and the spotlights dimmed, Freddie stepped to the very edge of the stage. He didn't wave. He didn't shout. He simply whispered into the mic. "You'll remember this night long after the lights go out again." And then he walked off stage. Backstage, a quiet encounter. The hallway behind the stage was chaos. Crew hauling cables, managers coordinating press, journalists begging for quotes. Freddie moved through it like a ghost. Calm, unhurried. The noise didn't seem to reach him. He was halfway to his dressing room when he heard a voice. "Excuse me, Mr. Mercury?" He turned. It was a woman from the front row, the one who'd mouthed "Don't stop" when the lights had first gone out. She stood holding her son's hand, the young deaf boy from earlier. His cheeks were still damp from crying, but he was smiling now, glowing. Freddie crouched to meet him at eye level. The boy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. On it, written in block letters, was a message. "I felt you sing." Freddie stared at the words, then at the boy, and something in him cracked open. He placed his hands gently on the boy's shoulders, looked him in the eye, and signed, slowly, with reverence. "You sang, too." The boy beamed. The mother covered her mouth, trembling. Before walking away, Freddie bent down again and whispered, "Promise me one thing." The boy nodded. "Next time the lights go out, don't be afraid. That's when we shine the most." The morning after, the papers couldn't agree on what to call it. A concert without electricity, and yet the most electric night in rock history. Queen's power outage becomes musical resurrection. Freddie Mercury turns silence into thunder. The greatest show that shouldn't have worked. Every headline was a variation on the same truth. When the stage went dark, Freddie Mercury didn't panic. He listened, and in that listening, he gave the world something it had forgotten how to do, to feel. Bootleg recordings of the blackout section surfaced within hours. Grainy cell phone footage of the call-in response, the clapping, the candle-lit Amazing Grace. Fans uploaded shaky videos of their neighbors singing, of Freddie whispering, of the humanity that filled that void of sound. Within days, the moment was myth. Music historians wrote think pieces. Psychologists analyzed the group psychology of collective resilience. Philosophers likened it to a musical baptism. Rock icons called it the boldest act of frontmanship in history. But Freddie didn't comment. He simply returned to his quiet flat in Kensington, poured a glass of wine, and sat on the balcony in his robe, looking up at the sky. The lights of London twinkled below, like a mirror of the crowd he'd stood before the night before. He sipped and whispered just to himself, "Next time they go out, I'll be ready." If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.